Imagine a young man who grew up watching his parents work 2 jobs each, every single day, and still struggled to pay rent. He went to school, he followed the rules, he studied hard, he did everything society told him to do. But somehow, at the end of it all, success never came. No job, no opportunity, no way up. And one day, quietly, almost without even realizing it, he made a decision that changed his entire life. Not out of cruelty, not out of madness, but out of desperation, out of a feeling that the door he was supposed to walk through had been locked from the other side the entire time. That feeling, that painful gap between what society promises you and what it actually gives you, has a name in criminology. It is called strain. And today, we are going to understand it completely. We're going to go deep into one of the most powerful theories ever written about why human beings commit crime. Not because they're evil, but because the system they live in leaves them no other choice. This is strain theory. To understand strain theory, we have to go back to 1938. A sociologist named Robert K. Merton was sitting down and asking a very uncomfortable question. Why does the United States, the wealthiest, most opportunity-promising society in the world, also have one of the highest crime rates in the world? That question bothered him deeply, because if crime was simply about poverty, then every poor country would have more crime than every rich one. But that was not what the data was showing. Something else was going on. Merton looked at society and noticed something brilliant. He said that every society sets up 2 things simultaneously. First, it sets up cultural goals, the things that people are supposed to want, the markers of success, the dreams. In America, that dream is money, status, and material wealth. Be rich, own a house, drive a nice car, have a successful career. These goals are advertised everywhere, in movies, in television, in newspapers, in schools. Everyone is told from childhood that this is what success looks like. But here's the second thing Merton noticed. Society also sets up institutionalized means, the legitimate pathways to achieve those goals. Education, hard work, climbing the corporate ladder, getting a good job, saving money. These are the approved, legal, socially acceptable roads to success. And now, here's the problem. These 2 things, the goals and the means, are not equally available to everyone. Society shouts the goals at everyone equally. Every child in every neighborhood hears the same message. You can be rich. You can succeed. The American dream is real. But the means, the actual pathways to get there, are distributed very unequally. A child born in a wealthy neighborhood gets access to excellent schools, connections, internships, social networks, and resources. A child born in poverty gets underfunded schools, overcrowded classrooms, broken infrastructure, and no connections. Both children were told the same dream, but one child has a ladder to climb toward it, and the other child is standing at the bottom of a wall with no ladder at all. Merton called this gap between the culturally promoted goals and the structurally available means anomie. This gap, this disconnection, this strain is what he argued causes crime. But Merton did not stop there. He went further and asked, when people experience this strain, how do they respond to it? And he identified 5 different ways, 5 adaptations that people use to cope with the tension between goals and means. The first is conformity. This is the most common response. The person accepts the goals of society and continues to pursue them through legitimate means, even if progress is slow and difficult. They keep working, keep studying, keep hoping. They do not turn to crime. Most people, despite whatever hardship they face, remain conformists. The second adaptation is innovation. This is where crime enters the picture. The innovator still wants the culturally approved goals. They still want wealth, status, and success, but they have given up on the legitimate means to get there, so they find other, illegitimate ways. They sell drugs, they steal, they commit fraud. They are not rejecting the dream of success, they are finding a shortcut to it through crime. Think of a young man who genuinely wants money and status, but lives in a neighborhood where no employer will hire him, where his school prepared him for nothing, where every legitimate door is closed. He looks at the drug dealer on the corner who drives a nice car, who has money in his pocket, who has respect in the community, and the logic becomes terrifyingly understandable. He is not choosing crime because he rejects society's values. He is choosing crime because he accepts them completely, but legitimate pathways are blocked. The third adaptation is ritualism. This person has quietly given up on the big dreams, but they continue going through the motions of legitimate behavior. They show up to their low-wage job every day, follow all the rules, never cause trouble, but they have internally abandoned any hope of actually achieving the grand goals. They're just surviving. They have lowered their expectations so dramatically that the strain disappears. The fourth adaptation is retreatism. Here, the person gives up entirely on both the goals and the means. They drop out of the system completely. They become chronic drug users, homeless individuals, people who have psychologically withdrawn from society because the gap between what was promised and what was delivered became too painful to bear. They are not fighting the system, they have simply abandoned it. And the fifth adaptation is rebellion. This is the most radical response. The rebel rejects both the goals and the means of mainstream society, but unlike the retreatist, they do not simply withdraw. They actively work to replace the existing system with a new one, with different goals and different means. Political revolutionaries, radical activists, or even terrorists can sometimes fall into this category. People who believe the entire system is so broken and so unjust that it must be torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. Let us make this even more concrete with a real-world example so that this theory truly lands in your mind and stays there. Think about a city like Chicago. On one side of the city, you have wealthy, predominantly white neighborhoods with excellent public schools, well-funded libraries, safe parks, and strong employment networks. On the other side of that same city, just a few miles away, you have predominantly black and brown neighborhoods that have been historically stripped of investment, where schools are underfunded, where violence is normalized, where jobs are scarce, and where entire generations have watched their parents and grandparents work hard and still die poor. Now, every single child in both of those neighborhoods watches the same television shows. Every child sees the same advertisements for luxury cars, expensive sneakers, and the glamorous lifestyle. Every child is taught in school that if they work hard, success is possible. The cultural goal is broadcast equally to both sides of that city, but the structural means are not equal at all. The child on the wealthy side has every ladder available. The child on the poor side has been told to climb a ladder that was never built for them. Merton would say, "The strain that results from this gap is not a personal failing, it is a structural contradiction. And when that strain becomes unbearable, innovation, crime, becomes a rational, almost logical response." This is why criminologists using strain theory never simply ask, why did this person commit a crime? They ask a much deeper question. What kind of society produces this level of strain, and who bears the heaviest burden of it? Now, Merton's strain theory was groundbreaking, but it had a limitation. It focused almost entirely on economic strain, on the gap between financial goals and blocked opportunities. But in 1992, a criminologist named Robert Agnew expanded the theory dramatically with what he called general strain theory. Agnew said, strain is not only about blocked economic success. Strain comes from three broad sources in human life. The first source is the failure to achieve positively valued goals. This includes Merton's original idea, not being able to achieve wealth, status, education, or respect, but Agnew broadened it beyond just economic success. The second source of strain is the removal of positively valued stimuli. This means losing something that matters deeply to you, losing a loved one to death, going through a divorce, losing a job, losing a close friendship, having your home taken away. When something good and meaningful is removed from your life, especially suddenly and unjustly, it creates intense strain that can push people toward crime, substance abuse, or violence. The third source of strain is the presentation of negative stimuli. This means being exposed to things that are painful, harmful, or threatening. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, discrimination, humiliation, chronic poverty, living in a violent neighborhood, being treated with constant disrespect. These negative experiences create an enormous emotional burden that can boil over into criminal behavior. Agnew argued that all three of these strains produce negative emotions, most powerfully, anger. And anger, when it is not processed or supported, often leads to crime, not because the person is broken or evil, but because they are in pain and they have been given no other tools to manage that pain. General strain theory is important because it explains so much more of human behavior. It explains why a middle-class person who suffers a devastating personal loss might turn to drugs. It explains why a bullied teenager might explode into violence. It explains why a laid-off worker with no safety net might commit fraud. The strain is not always about money. Sometimes it is about dignity. Sometimes it is about grief. Sometimes it is about the feeling that life is attacking you from all sides and there is nowhere left to turn. Like all great theories, strain theory has both powerful strengths and real criticisms. On the strength side, strain theory is extraordinarily compelling because it shifts the conversation about crime away from individual pathology and toward social structure. It refuses to simply label criminals as monsters and walk away. It asks harder questions about inequality, opportunity, and what kind of society we are building together. It is a fundamentally empathetic theory, and it is supported by enormous amounts of research showing that concentrated poverty and blocked opportunity are among the strongest predictors of crime anywhere in the world. But critics have raised important questions. One major criticism is that strain theory does not fully explain why most people who experience strain do not turn to crime. Many people grow up in identical conditions, same neighborhood, same blocked opportunities, same strains, and one person commits crime while another does not. What accounts for that difference? Strain theory alone struggles to answer this fully. This is where other theories like social control theory or social learning theory become necessary complements. Another criticism is that strain theory over-focuses on property crime and economic crime. It has more difficulty explaining crimes of passion, domestic violence, or white-collar crime committed by wealthy, privileged individuals who have no blocked opportunities at all. And yet another criticism is that the theory can unintentionally romanticize or excuse criminal behavior by explaining it entirely through structural factors, potentially underweighting individual moral agency and responsibility. These criticisms are fair. Good scholarship requires holding the theory's strengths and its limitations at the same time. No single theory explains all of human behavior, but strain theory explains a very significant and very important part of it. So let us come back to where we started. That young man who followed all the rules, who did everything right, and still found the door locked. Strain theory does not excuse his choices, but it demands that we understand them. It demands that we ask not just what he did, but what was done to him. What kind of society trained him to want something and then quietly made it impossible to have? Because here's the deepest truth that strain theory teaches us. Crime is not born in the darkness of individual souls. It is born in the gap, the brutal, unnecessary gap between what a society promises its people and what it actually delivers. If we want less crime, we cannot simply build more prisons. We cannot simply punish harder. We have to close that gap. We have to build a society where the goals we shout at every child are actually reachable by every child, where the ladder we tell people to climb actually exists for all of them. Until we do that, until we take the structural causes of crime as seriously as we take the individual consequences of it, we will keep producing the same strain, the same desperation, and the same heartbreaking outcomes generation after generation. Robert Merton asked us back in 1938 to look at society honestly and uncomfortably. That invitation has never expired. Thank you for watching. If this video made you think differently about crime in society, share it with someone who needs to hear this perspective. And subscribe, because next time we are going deeper.